Hi, welcome to Securing JavaScript. My name is Miles Borns. I'm a director of product management here at GitHub, and I work on GitHub packages and NPM. NPM itself is a critical tool in the open source software supply chain. We serve over 140 billion downloads a month to customers all around the world and are central to package management and distribution in the JavaScript ecosystem. And there are various threats to our overall software supply chain across open source as a whole, and more specifically to NPM itself, which is what we deal with day to day here at GitHub. One of the threats that we deal with at NPM is what's known as an ATO, or account takeover. And in particular, where this is dangerous is in the taking over of high impact package maintainer accounts. If a high impact manager's account is taken over, it can be used to publish vulnerabilities or malware in highly downloaded code. And we've seen this happen before. In particular, on October 22nd, 2021, we noticed that the UA parser.js package had been hijacked. This is a package with 1,200 plus dependents, 7.5 million weekly downloads. Malware was deployed to the post and installed via a post install script, and it took us 9 hours to remove it from the registry. This put us on high alert, and we made some changes to the way in which we were scanning malware and checking for vulnerabilities on the registry. And when a couple weeks later, the Koa package was hijacked, a package with 166 dependents, 9+ million weekly downloads, and malware installed via a post-install script, we were able to get that package removed in 30 minutes with the vulnerable version. And when later that day, the RC package was hijacked, a package with over 1,300 dependents and 13 million weekly downloads, similarly with malware deployed via a post-install script, we were able to take that down from the registry within 15 minutes. And so you may be asking, what did we do right? Well, one thing that we did is have malware scanning in place. This was an experimental scanning service that identified the malware in all 3 instances. We had been working on this for a number of months prior to the first account takeover that we mentioned with UA Parser, but we hadn't deeply integrated into our process because it had a lot of false positives. After the UA Parser incident, when we went through and did our debrief and we realized that the malware scanning had noticed it super early, we went through and augmented our scanning solution to notify us when high impact packages were scanned with malware. And that allowed us to have a much faster response time in the next 2 incidents. Another thing that allowed us to work quickly and solve these problems after the UA parser.js incident was clear policies. Malicious code is against our acceptable use policy, and we went through and updated the language to make it really clear and updated our internal processes, trained staff, and made sure that we were ready and able to act super quickly if this were to happen again. Not having clear policies is a really easy way to drag your feet, and you can't do that when you're in the midst of an incident. Another thing that we did was work on automated tooling. So we have a lot of chat ops that we use here at GitHub for doing a lot of different things. And we worked on very specific special commands for doing malware takedowns to packages that automate the whole process of everything we need to do, from removing a version to wiring everything up for setting up a advisory in the advisory database, to banning the account that published the package. All of this we now have that can be run by an agent with permissions, special permissions. Not everyone can do it, but for someone who does have permissions, they can do it with a single command in chat ops. And finally, we have all hands on deck ready to go when something like this happens. Through support, engineering, product, security, trust and safety, incident response, communications, we have a lot of different partners that need to be able to come together in short notice to handle these kinds of high risk incidents. And there were a lot of things that we learned from this. Account takeovers was a pattern. It was a common pattern amongst attackers as to how this was being done as well. The accounts had their passwords stolen. Attackers were using those stolen passwords to access the account. After accessing the account, they were then publishing malware through a post-install script. Another thing that was really clear was that time to response was extremely critical. The longer that the malware was up on the registry, the broader the impact that it would have. We also determined that strong 2FA may have stopped this. none of the compromised accounts had 2FA enabled. Two-factor authentication would have made it that if, hey, I came by and had gotten a password from a third party or from another source, maybe password reuse or through some other means, they would not have been able to get into the account without the second factor. And then the thing that was really clear is we need to stop these attacks. Malware distributed through high impact packages is an existential threat to both NPM and the entire open source software ecosystem. Every single time that there's a high profile security incident involving open source, people lose a little bit of trust. These are dents in the armor of the overall trust of open source, something that has been, helping industry flourish for decades. And it's important. And I think it's important for us both as stewards at NPM and stewards of the GitHub ecosystem for us to make sure that we do everything in our powers to ensure that folks are confident and secure and trust open source software. So we made this mission, and the mission was no more account takeovers. Now, we can never totally stop all takeovers, but what we can do is significantly raise the bar, introduce various defense in depth, and make it extremely hard for folks to take over accounts, at least much harder than it was in the past. And so we created what we called the NPM security roadmap with 4 major pillars that we were focused on for making sure that account takeovers would be significantly harder to happen in the future. The first step was login verification. When accounts don't have 2FA on it, we wanted to make sure that there was something in place to protect, and we did this through an emailed OTP, which we'll talk about in a minute. We wanted to roll out mandatory 2FA, specifically for high impact package maintainers. And we'll talk a little bit more about why we came up with that, what the definition was, and how we rolled that out. We needed to improve the 2FA experience. So if we're going to tell people, hey, you have to have 2FA or bother people pretty consistently to turn it on in their account, it better be a really good experience. So we invested in making 2FA delightful and trying to make it something that people would want to use. And finally, we needed to invest in improving account recovery. This is maybe not intuitive, but your account security is only as secure as your account recovery. If it's easier to recover an account than protecting via 2FA, then you actually don't have the level of account security you'd expect that 2FA would offer. On the flip side, if it's really hard to recover an account, that creates massive friction. And if we're telling people to enforce 2FA, if we're making them put it on their account, we are guaranteed to see more account recovery tickets come in. People lose their factors. People don't save their recovery codes, which, by the way, save your recovery codes. But we need to make it easier for folks to recover their account without lowering the bar of security overall. So let's dig into that concept of login verification that I was talking about. When you log in to your account and you don't have 2FA enabled on your account, you now get this screen: enter a one-time password. So for your security, when you try to log in, and if you don't have 2FA, we now send you an OTP via email that you need to put in. To be really clear, this isn't 2FA. And by the NIST standard, email cannot be used as a factor for two-factor authentication. You can go in and recover your account with passwords reset via the email. So if your email is the factor at which you're using to have a second factor, it isn't 2FA by the pure definition of it. But what this does mean is that if someone steals your password, they actually can't get into your account unless they also have access to your email address. This is a great reason why not to reuse passwords, but it also significantly raises the bar for account takeovers and stops in its track an attack known as password stuffing, which is when someone steals a database of passwords and email addresses from one site and then automates the process of trying to get into another site with the same email addresses and passwords. This means that unless the email address was also compromised, they're not able to get in. And so we started enrolling on December 7th publishers, so anyone who had published access to a package, into this new login verification process. This was, only about a month out from when the incident first started, and we wanted to have a clear solution in place as quickly as possible to significantly raise the minimum bar, and selfishly to make sure that we didn't have more incidents over the holidays, which would be coming up later in the year. We wanted to make sure, hey, we could actually take a break if possible. By January 4th, 2022, all publishers were enrolled in login verification. Part of the reason why we took a month to roll this out is because we knew that there were some edge cases For example, some maintainers may have old email addresses on their account. Some accounts had email addresses that were known to bounce. So we rolled this out in cohorts to make sure that we could test with a smaller group to make sure that there were no bugs to start with, and then that we only in the new year enrolled accounts that we thought would actually have problems, so that we didn't end up, like breaking someone else over the holidays as well. And by March 1st, we actually went ahead and introduced login verification for all accounts. Once we saw how successful it was with the publisher group, we decided this needs to be a new minimum bar for all NPM accounts on the entire registry. And it's been fairly successful. Now, as I mentioned before, this has resulted in more account recoveries. And that's something that we'll talk about afterwards, why and how we've invested in improving it. But improving security always tends to be a bit of a trade-off between security and usability. But overall, we found that this was a really great balance. Let's talk about two-factor authentication enforcement. I think that it's an incredible thing that we as an industry are moving in this way. But as someone who comes from a non-traditional background, I started programming with Node.js, building like weirdo art installations with Arduinos and stuff. I know that we need to be thoughtful about all the different kinds of maintainers that we have, and not everyone is going to be super intuitive, and there's accessibility concerns that can come up with this as well. In general, we can't disrupt our most important maintainers while trying to enforce 2FA. That was an ethos that we had as part of this. But we also need to protect the ecosystem and can't drag our feet on rolling this out. So we came up with a plan for two-factor authentication. First, we wanted to focus on ATO. And what this means is that the enforcement would only be for creating new sessions, not for publishing packages. Well, it is possible that account credentials can be stolen, such as an access token, and that access token could be used for rolling out malware. That wasn't the pattern that we had been seeing and the pattern that we were focused on. So we stayed extremely focused on what and why we were rolling this out, which was protecting from account takeovers. So we do not actually enforce folks to enable 2FA for publish, and there's still a way to opt out so that you can publish with 2FA, as well as other mechanisms of publishing and automation without 2FA, such as automation tokens. We did a phased rollout. We coordinated product improvements and expanded enforcement. We shipped to learn based on feedback. So our first group, which we'll talk about in a second, was the top 100 maintainers. And we didn't even roll out to them until we had introduced WebAuthn. And each one of the phased rollout groups aligned with more product launches that we did to improve both the 2FA and recovery experience. We also made sure that the entire process was maintainer first. We didn't want to disrupt workflows. So existing access tokens continued to work even after the 2FA deadline. So if you were a maintainer who has 2FA enforced on your account after the deadline, but you haven't set it up yet, but you've already minted access tokens either locally on your machine or in CI, those tokens can still be used to publish packages today. They cannot be used for doing any account administration. So you can't add new maintainers to packages. You can't create new tokens or new sessions. But we wanted to make sure that if a group of maintainers were being enforced, that we wouldn't be breaking their automations. Now, this is something that we may and probably will change in the future. We haven't decided on timelines or scope yet, but we wanted to make sure, at least for this rollout, that we were doing it in such a way that, again, really focused on account takeovers and really focused on making sure that we were as minimally as possible disrupting our overall maintainers' workflows. So the timeline looked like this. We enforced for the top 100 maintainers in February 1st, and this aligned with our public beta of our new 2FA process, so that allowed us to have WebAuthn and a few other features we'll talk in a bit. May 31st, we enforced for the top 500, and that aligned with the general availability of our new 2FA process, enhanced experience. And on November 1st, we enforced for high impact package maintainers. And that's all maintainers of packages with 1+ million weekly downloads or 500+ dependents. And after November 1st, whenever a package passes this threshold, maintainers are dynamically added into this list and given 15 days notice to enable 2FA on their accounts. As of September 27th, 2022, which is when I'm recording this session because I'm actually heading out on paternity leave soon, these are the stats of what adoption looked like. The top 100 maintainers had 90% adoption. The top 500 maintainers had 87% adoption, and the high impact maintainers have 74.5% adoption. This is relatively high adoption of 2FA, and it shows that our enforcement is working and moving people towards this. Right now, getting to 100% adoption is not a goal, as there are we know that the accounts are protected. We will be looking into ways of moving those numbers higher. But what is most important right now is that the vast majority of accounts are protected. So let's talk about improving the overall 2FA experience and making adding a second factor delightful. The first thing that we did to improve our overall 2FA experience was introducing WebAuthn. WebAuthn is a standard in the browser that supports a large number of different second factors, including security keys and biometric devices such as Touch ID and Windows Hello. Historically, the NPM registry only supported using a second factor on a phone with a mobile authenticator app, or what's also known as time-based one-time tokens, TOTP. And we only supported a single device. Now with WebAuthn, you can use all sorts of different devices based on what you're interested in using. We also went through and significantly improved the process of 2FA management, making 2FA better to use. We allow people to manage multiple security keys. We allow folks to set up and replace inline their authenticator app. Prior to this, you actually have to disable 2FA on your account in order to change your authenticator app, which doesn't really work with the whole concept of enforced 2FA. We also introduced the ability to view and manage recovery codes, which previously used to always not be viewable after the first time that you created them. And you would have to, again, turn off 2FA and re-enable 2FA and able to get them. And we got rid of modes, which was something that you would do when setting up your account, your 2FA on your account. You would be asked, do you want to enable 2FA for publish or just for auth? Now, by default, everyone has 2FA enabled for both auth and publish, and then you have the ability to opt out via additional options. And this may be necessary for folks who are transitioning and maybe have been using publish tokens rather than automation tokens in CI, and they don't want to break their continuous integration, or they enable 2FA and find that integrations were broken. This allows a quick opt-out so that folks can get things working properly. We also significantly invested in 2FA for organizations. So while we have a plan and a way in which we're rolling out 2FA to support folks in the registry, we want to allow organizations and organization admins to enforce 2FA for their organizations, which raises the bar for other smaller sections of the registry. We also wanted to make it easy for folks to audit the 2FA adoption of org members. For security reasons, we don't actually show on a profile page whether or not someone has 2FA enabled. Showing this would create a target on the backs of folks who don't have it enabled yet. But if you are a member of an organization and through that organization are being given access to packages and publishing, it's important that the admins of that organization know whether or not you have 2FA enabled. So this new auditing functionality that we introduced into the org makes it easier for org members, org admins, to make sure that they're aware of the adoption in their organizations. So one thing that we also invested in is streamlining the login and publish experience for the NPM CLI. And for that, I've got a demo for you. So let's look at the new login and publish experience that we have with NPM 9 that significantly improves the overall publish flow with WebAuthn. This experience is available if you're using later versions of NPM 8 by explicitly saying auth type equals web. But for now, we're just going to type in NPM login. You'll see that I'm no longer prompted to enter a username or password or anything. I'm prompted to hit enter to open a browser. And when I do that, it's going to send me to this page where it shows me who I'm authenticating as because it's using my existing session. I'll hit use security key, scan my fingerprint on my computer, and we can see authentication is successful. And I can go back to the terminal and we can see that I'm now authenticated. And what's the first thing that I may want to do while I'm authenticated? Well, of course, I'm going to want to go ahead and publish a package. I've got this package that I have a new version I need to publish. I'll similarly hit enter. It's going to open up a browser. It's going to challenge me for my security key. And you're going to notice this great little challenge, which allows me to click a button and say, don't challenge me again for my IP address, which I'm sorry, it's blurred out. I don't want to show you my IP. But for the combination of this IP address and my token, it's not going to challenge me to publish for the next 5 minutes with 2FA. This is really important if you're doing many operations at the same time. I'll use the security key. I'll scan my fingerprint. We'll see that it's verifying and that authentication was successful. And if we go back to the terminal momentarily, we are going to see that it published successfully. So the next big thing that we invested in was improving account recovery, because more 2FA means more recovery. And as I mentioned, we raise account security by raising the bar with 2FA, but if account recovery can happen at a lower security bar, we're only as secure as our account recovery process. So we had three different pillars for our improved account recovery process investment. First was process improvements. We invested in new playbooks that were reviewed by various account security experts in collaboration with our support teams to ensure that we can have a consistent process that's applied to all accounts that has an extremely high security bar. We were very inspired by the DMV by having a point system that we use internally to kind of think about how many factors of identity people have and then using those to determine whether or not there are enough points of identity to have a same or similar bar to the amount of security that 2FA offers. We invested in streamlining identity verification through both email verification and linking GitHub and Twitter. Prior to the work that we did here, the Twitter and GitHub accounts on your profile page was just a text box that you fill out. Now we have OAuth applications directly integrated with Twitter and GitHub that create a link that we can verify. And in fact, we automate all of that. So we now have a way through the verification process while you're doing recovery to automate the verification of all of these factors. And this is both more secure, more reliable, and quicker than anything that we had had previously for account recovery. And so with that in mind, let's go through a demo of what it looks like to do account recovery with the new process. So let's take a look at the new account recovery process that we have on NPM with automated identity verification. So I'm going to click to sign in, and I'm going to put in my username and password, which I'm not going to do right now because I don't want to give away any information about my account. And then I get prompted by the two-factor authentication screen. So on this screen, I would normally scan my fingerprint, or if I didn't have that handy, I might go to enter my two-factor authentication code. But I've lost all of those. So I may go to get a recovery code, but I've also misplaced my recovery codes. So I'm going to go ahead and click to recover my account. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to click to start account recovery. That's immediately going to bring me to this thing where I'm being shown my email address, but you can't see it right now because that's actually being blurred out to protect my privacy. But I'm being emailed a one-time password, which I would enter in. But we're going to go ahead and skip that verification right now because somehow I didn't get that. But if you did put in your one-time password there, the agent would know that you'd verified your email address. Now I'm in here. You could see my username. You could see my email address, which should also similarly be blurred out. I'm going to say that I need to reset my email. I'm going to go ahead and click to connect my GitHub account. And you can now see that I've linked to my GitHub account. I'm going to click to link my Twitter account, which is going to bring me here onto Twitter to verify and authorize the application, which I've gone ahead and done. And now you can see I have a support ticket with everything linked. And I say I want to reset actually my two-factor authentication, not my email. And I click to submit the support ticket. And now I've submitted to our support team. This ticket already has all of my identity verified, all of those factors, and the support team has everything they need to go ahead and recover my account. This is great because formerly this required so many back and forths with the agents. It's also great because we're able to do this programmatically and verify it actually, not just kind of like a trust us because you filled in some text. It's significantly better than what we had before and a great iteration in just making account recovery better for all of our customers. So you might be asking yourself, what's next for NPM now that we've done all of this work? And well, we've got some exciting stuff. So in this quarter, we're going to be releasing a public beta of something called granular access tokens. This has been a heavily requested feature, not just from the community, but by myself, of wanting tokens that are generated that don't have access to every single package that your account has access to. Granular access tokens will be able to be limited to specific packages, to specific scopes, or to an organization for doing admin work. If you wanted to, for example, automate adding and removing people to an organization when you add and remove them from your company. It allows you to set expiration dates on tokens and in fact has an enforced expiration date of no longer than 1 year. And also allows you to use a CIDR list to limit IP address ranges. So for example, if I'm setting automation up for a single package, I maintain a package called NodeOSC, and I'm doing that through automations on GitHub Actions. I can create a token that only has public access to just that one package and is limited to the IP range that is published publicly of GitHub Actions. If that token ever were to leak, it would only have access to that single package and could only be used in automation on GitHub Actions itself. The next feature that we're really excited about is linking packages to source and build. We're going to be doing a public beta in the new year, and this is a deep integration with SigStore. And what this is going to do is it's going to solve a problem that people have been asking for a long time, which is package signing. But we're not just going to be signing a package, and we're not going to be using a tool like GPG. Instead, we're going to be creating an attestation that follows the provenance of a package from the commit that was used to kick off the build, through the whole build itself, to the package that eventually ends up on the public registry. We're going to be integrating with a tool called SigStore, which is an open source tool for creating short-lived certificates and creating a notary to keep track of open source publishes. Other software registries have also been looking at using this tool for creating a signing solution. And what's going to be really great is this deep integration is going to surface directly in the NPM UI. So when a package builds and publishes with provenance, you'll be able to directly on the package page see that it was built that way, get a guarantee that the repository that it says that it came from is the repository that it came from. You'll be able to see the commit that was used to create the build scripts that were used to generate the package itself. And you're going to be able to tell if there's any mismatches or anything that you should be worried about. I think that this is one of the most important things that we're looking at building right now for software supply chain security. If you're interested, we have an open RFC right now that you can go and take a look at, and we'll be keeping the community updated as we make developments. So overall, as we think about Next and our roadmap, we've got three major things that we're focused on. We've got core security improvements. So this is investments in our infrastructure, in our internal processes, in the way that we manage the registry. This is something that we are always investing in, and it's an ongoing improvement. Then we're investing in customer-facing security features. So things like package signing and granular access tokens, ways in which we make using the registry itself more secure and giving our maintainers and publishers tools that they need to securely publish, and our consumers the tools that they need to securely consume packages. Finally, we're focused on innovation. We know that JavaScript is constantly evolving, and we need to keep our finger on the pulse of where the language is going to ensure that we have solutions for not just the JavaScript of today, but the JavaScript of tomorrow. With all of that in mind, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen today and to hear about everything we've been working on. You know, it's an ongoing journey, and I am just personally so excited to get to spend my days on this. Thank you so much.